The Cipher Brief, because national security is everyone's business.
It's my pleasure to welcome Paddy McGuiness. Paddy is the former UK Deputy National Security Advisor for Intelligence, Security and Resilience. And welcome. All right, Paddy, what we'll do is let you have the floor. Thank you, sir.
Well, thank you, sir, and good afternoon from Oxford, and wonderful to be with you. It's wonderful to see so many friends and colleagues from my service in government, but also work in the private sector, and to be with you today. It's a real honor. In particular, I'd like to recognize personally Congressman Langevin and his approach to partnership, which I have found compelling and was a great source of strength in transatlantic relationship. Now, I'm going to step away from this geopolitics and the governmental framing or the public-private framing of the challenges that we face and step into something where I think we could make an incremental, perhaps a large gain in the commercial resilience of enterprises. And so I want to talk about how we stimulate people outside the technology stack in business leadership to have a cyber sensibility and understand what their role and function is. Now, I've always felt it a privilege to be in the room where it happens during crisis. Yes, that's the vanity of being involved in history and events, but it's also because of the anthropology, because of the interest, the learning in seeing how people deal with crises. And that was true in helping British prime ministers come to our situation room and deal with whatever came up, including major technology events like North Korea getting at our healthcare system or Russian penetration of our telecommunications networks. But more than that, and more recently, and perhaps almost more compellingly, in the time I've had since leaving government in 2018, it's been the tens of occasions on which I've been with commercial entities, commercial leaderships, and across the world, and help them get through major technology events. And I frame it as technology events because, yes, I'm talking about intrusions, I'm talking about IP theft, I'm talking about data loss, and now, of course, predominantly ransomware events. But I'm also thinking about misconfigurations, about revealed vulnerabilities in products that need to be made public, and indeed malicious action by insiders, which is always sad to see. And it seems to me that the anthropology, those critical human factors, are increasingly important in successful response and when we try and build commercial resilience. And it seems to me there are significant gains in performance to be made, and we haven't bottomed out yet as a community what can be done in this area to our advantage. Now, it's rare for anybody to cite the European Union's general data protection regulations as a source of wisdom, but I think their stricture that organizations must take technical and organizational measures appropriate to the risk is a valuable call to action. And it seems to me, though still challenging, the technical aspects are increasingly well provided for. And I often feel when I advise leaderships in the course of a crisis that half my job is to create the space for the technologists to do their thing without too much solutioneering from the rest of the leadership of the board, impatient to get on with the business of the company. It's the organizational measures which, to my mind, need work, given that these events now, so many of them have whole of business consequence. Now, the large and medium enterprises that I find myself supporting all have business continuity plans. Almost all of them regularly put their executive leadership through crisis simulations, cyber simulations, and they try to sensitize the leadership to the cyber environment, all see some kind of reporting on external technology events, and they get detailed metrics, of course, on what happens internally in terms of compliance and behaviors. And of course, they'll be following the kind of conversations we've been having about Ukraine, even though they may find that they feel rather powerless in the face of them and are not clear what they should be doing. It's really interesting that in lessons learned, when we run a process after incidents, leaders who are outside the technology stack, aren't in the kind of CTO, CIO, CISO area, depending on the construct of the company, often say that there are unexpected organizational consequences of the event, which was not caught in the simulations or the planning. And in many cases, this is because of the interplay between the technology event and other major muscle movements in the business, perhaps an acquisition of a new business, a restructure, a change of leadership, an activist shareholder causing difficulties at governance level, an adverse reputational event of some kind. And the technology event has been prepared for in isolation rather than integrated with the real flow of business risks that businesses are dealing with. So how can we help them and how can we sensitize them to their role in cyber events? Last year, the Chief Executive Officer of the UK's National Cybersecurity Centre, Lindsay Cameron, made a striking recommendation on how CEOs and their teams might prepare for ransomware events. She said they should speak to others who have got through them. Consciously or not, she was recognizing the shortfall in true situational awareness. Many, perhaps most incidents are not made public. That's certainly my experience. And when they are, the detail of how they actually played out is very rarely shared. And the focus, if anything is shared, is very often technical. I can think of no example where, for instance, a chief finance officer has talked about the real difficulty of discerning where market reporting obligations kick in, or what it feels like when they're not sure they're going to be able to make payroll, or a chief people officer finding a shortfall in social media policies within their company just at the time that the online presence of their staff becomes part of their attack surface. Or indeed communications leaders who find that they can't galvanize the staff they need to see them through the event because the means they usually use are gone. So it isn't just the aggregation and the anonymization or the making generic and sharing of multiple experiences of reasonable worst case scenarios which have been lived by others, which could put this right, although I'm sure Lindy's right to suggest it. A structured process is needed to map the toolkits and disciplines which respective company officers are going to need during technology events. And you need tailored engagement with them and their teams to encourage and build a determination to build those tools. This isn't trying to overawe or overburden business leaders, but rather get them focused on what they uniquely can do in the cyber context and avoid them solutioneering for others. And my final point, Matt, this only works if the heightened awareness which that kind of process creates persists. Now, the Cipher Brief community is all too used to managing down vulnerabilities and tracking them. These technology events often reveal organizational vulnerabilities or risk combinations which have not been prepared for. Addressing them in the full flood of events is hard work. A question to ask, and maybe it's one for Stu Solomon from our previous session, is whether the intelligence or reporting feed to non-technical company officers enables them to hone their contribution or leads them to think that these are technical matters. The scenario I am always trying to avoid is where organizational defeat is snatched from the jaws of technical victory. Thanks very much.
I appreciate it. Thank you so much, Paddy. And it's a great conversation about a call to action to get our senior leaders really on the same page with our technology leaders. So thank you very much. We really appreciate that.